This is Battles in the East by Decision Games, Volume 1. Bagration Stopped is the scenario I'm playing. I just got to the end of turn 2, which was mainly German withdrawals and attempts to create some sort of defence here. So yeah, where they can, they've pulled back and just tried to set up situations which are hard for the Russians to infiltrate. Warsaw's reasonably well held. Model has come down here with his HQ to try and ensure that this defence of his city Radon here, which is an automatic victory city for the Russians, is held. Warsaw isn't under any particular threat, so there is some defence here behind the Vistula further up, and the Russians are kind of reaching the limits of where they can supply through their HQ, second tank HQ, to push further on. Up over here again, attempts made to reinforce and pull back. The Germans did actually run a couple of successful overruns. We've got some Russian units on the dead pile here because they overran the 3rd SS, overran one of those units which was sitting here in order to unblock this bridge and retreat across it. The pullback continued from these advancing Russian units, but you can see some German Second Army units stuck in there, regiments of infantry stuck in here, pulling back as far and fast as they can. It's all a bit haphazard, but they were desperate to get units back in the way of this stuff that was coming through, and you can see 5th SS plugging a gap in there, and you can see some Tigers and 3rd SS in here, and it's all very hodgepodge and haphazard, but at least there is stuff there now to stand in the way generally of these Russians, although I fear what's going to happen up here when this set of Russian divisions moves forward. So yeah, the only good thing happening for the Germans right now is that this is the last turn of attack supply, at least for 4 of these Soviet armies. But apart from that, there's very little light at the end of the tunnel right now. I would say though that while the Russians are making impressive gains and look like they're going to keep looking like they're going to roll over the German defences, not much of it is scoring them points. Advances down here across the Vistula can kind of score them points, and but taking things up here is what they need to do, and you know they're nowhere close to taking Modlin, and you know these cities are actually defended to some extent. So yeah, they're making ground, but not necessarily scoring victory points for it. So that is that is an interesting facet of the game, in that it's satisfying as the Russians to be making successful attacks and pushing forward and feeling like you're making ground, but are you actually winning the battle in the way the designers intended is a different question. Anyway, all we can do is try and push forward and defeat what's in front of us. So that's what we're going to do for turn 3. So I've done the Russian turn 5 and the Russian attacks and moves and everything, and you can see down in this southwest corner of the board you can see a fairly static line. The Germans have built a defensive line around this auto-lose city of Radom down here, which is now well defended by some reinforcements that arrived this turn. Some German moves have been done, I'm working through them, but yeah, there's a fairly solid now German line here, and then a break in the line here with nothing going on. Then Warsaw defended. The Poles have sort of activated and are pushed out to put some threat on this other auto victory town for the Russians model in here, so they sort of aimed at that. And then you can see a fairly substantial German defence now around the city in here, which is a victory point city, Vyshkov. And then again, Russians pushing, but the Germans holding. So a lot of the Russian formations ran out of attack supply in turn 4, and that really does slow them down. You can only make one attack with a formation. Their attack strength is halved. Good German units can hold on. Yeah, it does. And the ability to retreat instead of take losses, as long as you've got retreat paths, does mean that, if the Germans aren't caught, aren't trapped, and they can just trade, losses for hexes, it's quite hard to make progress, because they can just drop back. So you can see, fairly static lines now starting to emerge, where the Russians have pushed, destroyed quite a fair number of German units, but are now hitting more robust resistance and aren't able to make progress. I'm doing the German moves. There's not a huge amount to do for them, but one thing we are considering is whether it's viable to continue holding this Zagrezi here, which is a victory point hex. And the trouble is that this Polish infantry, if the Russians were to give Poles attack supply next turn, then they could just drop across this river into here and completely surround us in here, push across this river here, pull their mech round here. They've got lots of aggressive moves to completely cut that Panzer unit, that armoured unit, off from 4th Panzer there. And there really ain't a lot around for us to do a lot about it. And if we move this guy, then they can just cut the roads and cut us out of supply anyway. So they could cut everything out of supply, even if we reinforced. So it's going to be very hard for us to hold with the Vistula River here and the bridges, because although, yeah, very, very difficult. We can't trace supply across the Vistula or across the Bug River, whatever river this is, the Narrow River or the Bug River. We can't trace supply across any of it except at road hexes, and those are so easily cut. So I think I'm making a decision to pull 4th Panzer out of there, give up the victory point, and live to fight another day. And then there'll just be some shuffling around of units up in this sector, just to try and ensure that our defences are as robust as they can be. And then we'll be into turn 6. Well, I was talking here in Battles in the East about how difficult it can be to make progress, but sometimes you do get a situation where, especially as the German player, you've got a really, really nasty decision about whether to take the losses or whether to trade them for space. In this situation, we've just had an attack by these guys, now in attack supply. These 2 stacks attacked into here and have just taken a step loss themselves, but caused 2 step losses. So the Germans have got 2 options. They take 2 step losses, or they retreat 2 hexes. Now the trouble here, given the wider picture, if they take the 2 step losses, what they're left with is essentially a reduced armoured battalion holding the line there, a 118, which is obviously going to fall apart unless it's reinforced by the Germans this turn. They have got, backup back here that could bolster it back up, replace these losses. So that's one option, but it's not a nice looking option, but it is an option, given that there's been a mini breakthrough down here. So moving this guy out, it leaves things very thin, but that may be the only option they've got, because the alternative is to retreat 2 hexes, but wherever they go, that looks really unpleasant. Let's say they retreat back to here like this. I mean, the advance after combat, this mechanized stuff could advance in and then follow them here, and this infantry here could follow straight in here, and this guy's now completely surrounded and out of supply, and this guy's now got all his flanks exposed and is ready to be cut off, and so the 5th SS can't hold that position out on their own. There's now no way of reinforcing this. He's just doomed. And this all just looks really unpleasant. So both options for the Germans here looking extremely nasty, and I think they are going to have to take the losses, purely because that was there and this was here, I think. Yeah, it must have been like that. No, it was further back here. It was like this, wasn't it? Like this. One across the river, one not across the river. I'll check back. But yeah, this is an extremely difficult position, and I think the Germans have to take the losses here. So the Russians not making progress, but sort of wearing the Germans down with weight of numbers. Okay, part way through turn 7 here in Bagration Stopped battles in the East decision games, and I'm just getting to the point where I'm starting to look at the victory conditions more closely. And you can see the Soviet player gains victory points counted at the end of the game. They get 1 for occupying each of these 5 cities: Agrezi, Serok, Vyshkov, Pultutsk and Rozan. I can tell you that they control 3 of those. They've got Zagrezi, they've got Serok, and they've got Pultutsk. So that's 3 points there. And then 1 victory point for every 2 Soviet-controlled hexes west of the Vistula, all northwest of the Naru River that have no German units within 2 hexes. And if we come over here, we can see all this push across the Vistula River, west of the Vistula River, and we're now piling in these blue units from the 70th in here. So we've got hexes here, here, here and here currently, controlled, no Germans within 2. Maybe this one isn't quite, because there's a cavalry up there, but there's nothing stopping us just dropping a bit further south and claiming these. And we've dropped a few units back here, and we've got another couple there. So, you know, we've got 4 more units about to cross the Vistula here. So this is going to add up to 1, once these spread out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 odd points on its own down here. 3 points up for controlling cities up here is going to be 10 points. And the Russians need 8 for a strategic victory. The reality is there's not much the Germans can do to stop it now. There's really very little counter-punch in these Germans. Certainly, again, given how easy it is, we've seen it is to trade space for losses. You know, I don't fancy the Germans' chances of getting attacks together that can really do much about this. They're certainly not retaking any of these cities up here, and you know, they might shuffle things around, but they're not going to claim enough ground to stop the Russians having, you know, 10 or 15, 10, 12, whatever hexes west of the Vistula, outside of a 2 hex range of a German unit. It's just they'd have to make multiple breakthroughs, and it's not going to happen. So yeah, and of course the Russians can easily come in here. This is only 1 defense strength, so they could easily push up in here and force this thing back if they really wanted to. Create some more space for themselves and grab a whole chunk of land up over here if they really need to. So yeah, there's not much left to play for here. In reality, it's interesting to see whether the Russians can break through up here with all the attack supply they've got, but they're not scoring any points for it. You know, they are grinding forward, but they've got to get here, Rozan, to score 1 more point, and that seems like an awful lot of work for 3 turns to even try and get there. I don't quite think they'll make it. The Germans will retreat out of the way a bit too easily. They won't make it through this swamp. They're not going to make it across this river line because this purple formation The 47th Army doesn't have attack supply. And these guys are holding what they need to. They're not going to make it into Warsaw. They never made that a priority. They made pushing further north into the victory point locations and stretching the Germans their priority. They've done that adequately. And down here, I didn't realise quite how easy or quite how valuable it was going to be for the Russians to take all this ground, and it's going to win them the game. And I given the amount of stuff that starts down here for the Germans, I really don't know how you're supposed to stop this from happening. But, you know, clearly they were supposed to make more of a fist of it than I did for them. So there it is. I think partway through turn 7, this is getting called as a strategic victory for the Russians. Thoughts on the game then? Really like it. Lovely components to start with. Nice and short rule book, clean, easy to play, simple combat table, simple resolution. Yeah, you're not having to remember lots of complex processes. It's a move and fight kind of, you know, it's a move and fight with a little wrinkle of the additional mechanised movement, the second movement phase for mechanised movement, some little bits of chrome around air power, but it's really, you know, a supply and manoeuvre game. The way the zones of control and the retreats work is cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, pretty, yeah, just nice and clean, easy to play, easy to remember, comfortable, lovely components. No problem with this game at all. I will definitely play the other battle in this box. What's that called? The Sandet Offensive, I think it's called. We'll definitely wheel that one out at some point, but for now, time to move on to something else. But yeah, lovely game this. Good stuff from Decision Games here. Not always a fan of their productions, but this one's really classy.